Many people, when they start looking at going on a trip to Walt Disney World, will price up what it costs to stay in a Disney World resort, staying on site, and also staying in hotels in Orlando themselves, staying off site. Typically the prices for off-site hotels come in significantly cheaper, so it seems a bit of a no-brainer, right? But today I'm going to talk to you all about how, in fact, sometimes staying off-site in a hotel in Orlando can cost more than staying on-site in a hotel at Disney, and it all comes down to two words: hidden charges. Once you actually factor in the cost for all of these extras and hidden charges at staying in an off-site hotel, sometimes it can work out around the same price or even more expensive than staying on-site at a Disney World resort. So to make sure you never fall into this trap again or arrive and suddenly get lots of charges you weren't expecting, I will let you know exactly what to look out for. Today I'm going to talk you through exactly what these hidden charges may be, what to look out for, and then with all of this information you will then be able to cost up the full price of your accommodation to really see the true costs and work out if it is cheaper to stay on-site or off-site when visiting Disney World. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what on-site and off-site means. So staying on-site is to stay in a Disney World resort, and the term off-site means any hotels that are not on the Disney World property but instead are in Orlando. There are a handful of other hotels that are technically on-site because they are on Disney property, although they aren't owned by Disney. They do have some additional benefits that you wouldn't get if you were staying in an off-site hotel, but they also don't have the same level of benefits as if you were staying on-site at a Disney World hotel. For the purpose of this video, when I talk about being on-site, I'm talking about the Disney World resorts themselves. So let's dive into what these hidden costs are and what you actually need to add on top of the rate you see when you look up off-site hotels. Typically, if you go on a website such as TUI or Virgin Holidays and they come up with lots of different hotels, both at Disney and off-site, the Disney hotels are significantly more expensive. So it seems pretty obvious that you're going to go for the much more affordable options of staying off-site. Now, one of the first things you're going to want to look out for are resort fees. These are very common these days, but they may just be in the small print. It may be difficult to find out what the actual resort fees are. Resort fees are used by hotels to cover things like Wi-Fi, fitness centres, pools, and even if you don't use any of these things, you will still have to pay the resort fee. This can be a big money trap because resort fees can range from $10 to $50 a day. If you are visiting for 2 weeks, this very quickly will add up to hundreds of extra dollars. Resort fees typically are not included in the price that you first see, so you do need to make sure by either contacting the hotel or the travel agency you're going to be using if resort fees are included or if you will have to pay them on top when you arrive. Something else that you may be charged are local fees or occupancy tax. It's the same thing but different names. Some people may call this a tourist tax. It's actually quite common to find this all around the world now, but in Orlando this will typically be around 6.5% on top of your room rate, and you'll pay it when you arrive at the hotel. You may also be asked to put a deposit down for incidentals. Typically when you arrive they will ask for a credit card and then they will put a hold of a certain amount of money on your card just in case there's any damage, anything like that, or you have charged anything to your room. At the end of your stay, if you don't have any charges against your room, they'll then refund this deposit back to you. This can be problematic though if you are planning on using your credit card to pay for most things whilst you're on holiday. This could have an impact on your budget because all credit cards have a limit, and if you already had some money taken away by this deposit, it may then eat into your budget because you were not expecting this. A big thing to consider is how you are going to get to the parks if you are staying off-site. Luckily there are a range of different ways to get from off-site hotels to Disney World, but I'm going to let you know how these costs can actually add up quite quickly. Many off-site hotels will offer a shuttle to the Disney parks. This is fantastic because you've got a way of getting to the parks, but the downside is sometimes the schedules are very limited. Also, some resorts may charge for this. It's usually not a big amount, but of course you do need to add that up per person over the course of your stay, so do be sure to factor that in. Because of the limited amount of buses that these hotels put on, some people do end up having to resort to using taxis or lifts or Ubers because there's just not enough time suitable for when they need to get to and from the parks. Using taxis, Ubers and lifts will very, very quickly add up. If you do end up using them, you're going to need at least 2 trips per day. So over 14 days, that could be up to 28 journeys. And also, if you're going to be using ride-sharing services like Lyft and Uber, beware of surge pricing. So if you do want to arrive for rope drop shop or leave after the fireworks, the prices are going to be significantly more. And of course, the further your hotel away is from Disney World, the more expensive these journeys are going to be. So if you plan on using taxis, Ubers or lifts, or if you have to use them because the hotel shuttle doesn't run frequently enough, you are very quickly going to be adding hundreds of dollars onto the top of your trip. Another option that I see a lot of people suggesting to use is using the Lynx bus. The Lynx bus runs along International Drive where a lot of off-site hotels are and actually takes you to Disney Springs. This sounds absolutely perfect because they're frequent, they're cheap, and it seems super handy. The downside is once you get to Disney Springs, there are no buses that go to the parks. You then have to get on a bus to a Disney hotel, then swap onto a bus to the parks. So although this is a cheap option, it actually takes an incredible amount of time, and I know a lot of people who have gone to Orlando thinking they're going to use the Lynx bus, and then it's so inconvenient they end up switching to taxis and they end up spending so much more money on transportation than they're expecting. It's also worth noting that the buses from Disney Springs to the Disney hotels do not run all day long, so you may find yourself arriving and there's no buses for you to get there. This is partly because Disney have realised people will try and use the Lynx bus or maybe even park at Disney Springs as a way to avoid parking fees, things like that. So they kind of have stopped that by making sure the buses don't run all of the time. So this could be a big hurdle for you. To cut out all of the transportation stress, you might be wanting to hire a car. That's actually my preferred way of travelling when in Orlando, but it is worth noting if you're staying off-site to think about the parking charges at your hotel and also in the parks. Some off-site hotels in Orlando will offer free parking, which is fantastic, whereas others will charge, so do be sure to check out that fine print to see what your hotel policy is. If you are going to be driving to the theme parks and parking, this currently costs $25 a day. Very, very quickly over your trip, that is going to come up to hundreds of dollars. And if your hotel also charges for parking, sometimes that can cost as much as parking in the parks. So you could be paying upwards of $50 a day for parking. And the final thing to consider when staying offsite is how you're going to get to and from the airport to your hotel. Now, if you were staying at a Disney resort, you may be able to get something like Mears Connect or the Sunshine Flyer, which costs around $30 round trip. Super handy, super convenient. They're big coaches and that's all they do, backwards and forwards to the airport and the hotels. Unfortunately, they don't go to the off-site hotels, so you would have to find alternative means, whether that's a private taxi service or something like Uber or Lyft. Privately booked taxis are the more expensive option, but you have a set fee. Lyft and Uber, obviously much cheaper, but when you first land, you could have a surge in pricing because hundreds of people have come off your flight, are trying to do the same thing. So it could actually be very, very pricey. So those are all the hidden costs you should look out for when you are staying at an off-site hotel. Either contact the hotel or your travel agency to see if these things are included or not, so that you don't get a shock when you arrive. For comparison, when you stay at a Disney World resort, there are no resort fees or extra taxes. Everything is already included in the price. You also do not have to pay for parking at your hotel or even parking at the parks themselves. And of course, Disney has a range of free transportation. So if you aren't hiring a car, once you're at Disney, you can get the buses, the monorail, they've got boats, they've got the Skyliner. There's lots of ways to get around Disney, so you don't have to be paying out for taxis, Ubers or lifts. Another thing to consider is if you are staying at a Disney World resort when there is an offer on, such as the free Disney dining credits, this will help reduce the cost of your trip because some of the costs towards food you won't be paying for. So that is another thing to consider when you are pricing up staying off-site and on-site. So whenever I go to Orlando myself, I always make sure that I look up both prices for on-site and off-site, but I also look up all of these hidden fees and see the real cost of staying at an off-site hotel. Oftentimes I've actually found they end up being comparable. There's not much difference in it, and sometimes it can even be slightly cheaper to stay at Disney World itself. So if you are looking at staying off-site, when you see that initial cost, make sure you also look up these following things. Check if there are any resort fees. Check if you have to pay a local tax or occupancy tax. Check if there are any parking fees. Be sure to factor in the cost for parking at the Disney parks themselves. Look into the cost to get from your hotel to the Disney parks if you are not hiring a car. And also look into the costs of how much it's going to cost you to get from the airport to your hotel and back. Staying off-site can be a really great option, particularly if you want to do a lot of other things in Orlando, not just Disney, and you also have a range of different areas to stay in and types of hotels. You can also get lots of really great deals staying off-site, but just make sure you double check all of the things that we've mentioned so that you can see the true cost of your trip and you don't get any nasty surprises once you arrive. If you are thinking of staying off-site, some of the closest areas to Disney World are Lake Buena Vista and Flamingo Crossing. Lake Buena Vista is the Magic Kingdom Disney Springs side of Disney, and Flamingo Crossing is the Animal Kingdom side of Disney. Kissimmee is an area you would have most likely heard of. It's a very, very popular hotel location in Orlando. It is a bit further away from the Disney parks than Lake Buena Vista, but it's in that same area. Somewhere that is super popular is International Drive. This is a super long road that goes between Universal and Disney, and here there are tons of different hotels, lots of food, entertainment. So if you are looking to stay in Orlando and see all the attractions and it not be a Disney focused trip, International Drive can be a really good option. And if you do want to stay in that Disney bubble, then staying at Disney itself is fantastic. The hotels have great theming, it's super easy to get to all the different parks, and you just feel that Disney magic your entire trip. When you first compare the prices, sometimes it can seem like Disney World is totally out of reach, but once you actually factor in all of these other costs, it may not be that much difference. So it's just down to personal preference whether you want to stay on-site or off-site. I hope this video has been super helpful for you in getting some facts about what these hidden costs might be and how staying on-site might be more affordable than you think, and how being off-site can sometimes be much more expensive than you're anticipating. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you do love videos all about planning trips to Disney World, Disneyland Paris, and also seeing vlogs of trips, then make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. But until next time, I hope you have a most magical day. Bye bye.